The trembling hands, the lights above the stage were too bright. They didn't feel warm like sunlight. Instead, they burned with pressure, with judgment, with all the eyes of the world watching. Ana de Armas stood behind the curtain, clutching a folded paper in her trembling hands. The paper was damp from her sweaty palms. It held her speech, the words she had written with hope, fear, and everything in between. She had been asked to speak at the Global Peace and Creativity Summit in Vienna. She wasn't just an actress today. She was a voice for women, for artists, for dreamers. She had been honored. But now, it felt like a trap. She could hear the noise outside, cameras clicking, whispers growing louder, applause fading as the host finished her introduction. Ana was next. Her name echoed across the hall. And suddenly, silence. Her feet wouldn't move. Behind her, someone walked up slowly and quietly. A gentle hand touched her shoulder. She turned around quickly, eyes wide, breathing fast. It was him. Keanu Reeves. He didn't say anything at first. He didn't have to. His presence alone was calming, like shade in the middle of heat, like silence. In the middle of noise, Ana tried to speak, but her throat felt tight. Instead, she looked down at the floor, then at her shaking hands. "I can't do it," she whispered. "They're all out there, waiting." Keanu knelt slightly, so their eyes were level. "Then let them wait," he said, voice steady, warm, and firm. "You don't have to rush. Breathe with me." He slowly inhaled, then exhaled. She followed. Once, twice. Then he held her hand, not tightly, not to control, just enough to remind her she wasn't alone. "What if they hate it?" she asked. "What if I mess up? What if they laugh at me?" He looked into her eyes. "Then we face it together. You wrote from your heart. Speak from it. If your voice shakes, let it shake. It only means it matters." Ana blinked. Something warm spilled over her lashes. She wiped her tears with the edge of her sleeve, barely nodding. The curtain began to part. The host was waiting. The hall, full of leaders, diplomats, and artists, was now silent again. Her name was called a second time. Keanu didn't let go of her hand. He walked with her right to the edge of the curtain, then stopped. Just before she stepped into the spotlight, she felt her legs freeze again. He leaned in, just a breath away from her ear. "Remember," he said softly, "you're not alone. Look to the third row. I'll be right there." And then she stepped out. The lights were still blinding, the crowd still large, but something had changed. She wasn't alone. Her voice cracked at first, but she didn't stop. Her hands still shook, but she didn't hide them. Her words trembled, but the truth behind them made hearts listen. Keanu sat in the third row, silently, watching. He didn't blink, didn't check his phone, didn't look away. Every time she glanced toward him, he nodded once, not to direct, but to remind her he believed in her. By the time she reached the last lines of her speech, the hall was silent in the most powerful way. Not bored, not cold, just listening. Deeply. When she finished, there was a long pause. Then one pair of hands clapped. Keanu's. Strong. Proud. Slow. Steady. Others followed. Leaders who rarely clapped. Critics who never showed emotion. Even translators stopped speaking. They all stood. Ana stood frozen again, but for a very different reason. This time it was disbelief. This time her hands weren't trembling. They were over her heart. When she walked off stage, she nearly collapsed into Keanu's arms. He didn't say a word. He just held her. Not to make a scene, not for the cameras. He held her like a friend would hold another after a silent storm had passed. What no one knew was what had happened backstage. They only saw a woman who stepped up. They didn't know how close she had been to running away. But The cameras caught one thing: Keanu standing in the third row, nodding with pride as she spoke. And that image, that still moment of silent support, would be studied later in leadership classes, in schools, in articles, because true leadership, they said, wasn't loud. Sometimes it was simply being there, and Keanu had been there, exactly when it mattered most. After the applause, when the doors of the backstage hallway closed behind her, Anna finally let out the breath she didn't know she was holding. Her chest rose and fell like waves after a storm. The applause still echoed faintly behind the heavy, velvet curtains, but in her mind, all she could hear was her own heartbeat. Keanu stood close, but not too close. He respected space the way others respected fame. He waited silently, letting her feel everything: the shock, the relief, the quiet tears that came next. She turned toward him slowly, her eyes glossy, her voice hushed. "I thought I was going to faint." "You didn't," he said softly. "You stood, you spoke, and they listened." Anna wiped her face again, laughing through the emotion. "They actually clapped." "They didn't just clap," Keanu said. "They felt you. That's rarer than applause." The event organizers were rushing now, shaking hands, offering compliments, trying to move to the next scheduled speaker. Someone tried to push a microphone toward Anna for a post-speech comment. Keanu gently stepped forward, placed a hand on the man's shoulder, and nodded toward the exit. "Give her a moment," he said kindly. The man, surprised, backed away without argument. Anna smiled through her exhaustion. "You always know what to say, or what not to say." Keanu looked at her, a quiet smile on his face. "Sometimes silence says more than words." They walked together down the quiet corridor, away from the noise and lights. Anna's steps were slower now, thoughtful. She looked down at her hands. They weren't shaking anymore. "When did you learn to be this calm?" she asked. He chuckled, softly. "I'm not always calm. I've just learned to look for what matters in the moment." "And what matters right now?" she asked, almost afraid of the answer. He looked at her, eyes steady. "You." She stopped walking. Something in her heart paused, too. She wasn't used to being someone's what matters. Not without a script. Not without lights or cameras. He pointed to a bench nearby. "Come on, let's sit." They sat in silence for a while, not awkward, just present. Then Anna finally spoke. "I used to think strength meant never showing fear." "Most people do," Keanu said. "But you saw me scared, broken almost, and you didn't look away. Because that's not weakness," he said. "That's honesty. And honesty is what makes people brave, not cold." She leaned back, her gaze lifting toward the ceiling. "I've done hundreds of interviews, press tours, film premieres, but nothing felt like today. That's because today wasn't performance. It was presence." The words stayed with her. A staff member approached quietly, handing her a card. "Someone from the United Nations would like to meet you after the event," he said. "They were moved by your speech." Anna looked stunned. "Me?" The man nodded. "They said you reminded them of what leadership really looks like." Anna looked at Keanu, speechless. He only smiled. "I told you. They felt you." As the sun dipped outside the conference center, they stepped out into the fresh air. Photographers were still outside, but at a distance. This time, the camera lenses didn't feel like knives. They felt small, less important than the moment she had just lived. Keanu opened the car door for her, and she slid in, thoughtful. As the car moved through the city streets, she stared out the window, then turned to him. "Can I ask something?" "Of course," he said. "Why were you backstage at that moment?" "You weren't scheduled to be there." He looked at her for a moment, then answered quietly. "I had a feeling. Something told me you'd need someone. And if not, I'd just be a quiet shadow. Sometimes the best thing you can be is available." Anna's eyes filled again, But she didn't cry. Instead, she nodded slowly. Because for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she had to prove anything. Not to the world. Not even to herself. She had already done it. With a trembling voice, a brave heart, and the quiet presence of a friend who understood what it meant to lead without stepping in front. And now, everything was starting to change.
The quiet ripple 3 days had passed since Anna's speech at the summit. 3 quiet days, or so she thought. She had returned to her apartment in Los Angeles hoping for stillness. No red carpets, no press junkets, no noise. But peace, when
Real has a strange way of echoing even louder than applause. On the 3rd morning, she awoke to a flood of messages on her phone. Not just texts from friends, but emails from writers, professors, artists, and even a few students. Messages in English, Spanish, French, and languages she didn't recognize. Some were simple. Thank you. Others were long letters, filled with emotion. Stories of young women who had felt voiceless, of men who hadn't understood their silence until now, of teachers playing her speech to teenagers and asking, "What does bravery sound like?" Anna sat on the couch, legs folded, robe still wrapped around her, scrolling through the endless words from strangers. And then came the article. A journalist from a well-known leadership magazine had written a piece titled, "When Silence Leads: The Power of Presence Backstage." The article didn't just praise Anna's speech. It broke down the moment before the speech, the video clips, the small gestures, the second of hesitation, and the one figure who stepped into that moment without asking for attention: Keanu Reeves. It described how leadership wasn't always about taking the mic. Sometimes it was about standing just close enough so someone else could find their voice. The article called it a textbook moment. Anna read it twice. Then her hands trembled again, not from fear, but from a deep sense of being seen. Not as a celebrity, but as a human being. Later that day, she met Keanu again. This time, at a quiet cafe tucked between 2 bookstores, the kind of place no paparazzi ever cared to find. The cafe was almost empty. Keanu was already there, reading something on his phone with a soft smile. When he looked up, Anna noticed a calm glow in his eyes. "So," he said, sipping tea, "you've been busy." She shook her head, laughing. "I didn't do anything. I just spoke." "Exactly," he replied. "And that's the most powerful thing you've ever done." She pulled out her phone and slid it across the table, showing him the article. "You're in it too," she said. He scanned the headline and smiled. "They got it wrong," he said quietly. "You led that moment. I just stood beside it." Anna leaned in. "Keanu, do you know how many young people are writing to me now? Girls who say they watched the clip 100 times, not for the speech, but for how someone believed in them without taking over." He tilted his head. "I think they're watching both." There was a pause. Anna reached into her bag and pulled out a handwritten letter. This one hit me the hardest," she said, unfolding the page. "A teacher from India. She said she printed out a picture of that moment, me at the podium, you in the 3rd row, and pinned it in her classroom. She wrote, 'This is what support looks like.'" Keanu stared at the letter, deeply moved. "You know," he said after a while, "people think changing the world means doing something massive. Sometimes it just means not walking away when someone's scared." Anna looked at him, eyes soft. "Why are you always like this?" "Like what?" Still, so present." He smiled gently. "Because I've seen what it looks like when people leave too early. I'd rather stay." The cafe grew even quieter. A soft rain had started outside, tapping against the windows like nature's applause. Anna finally asked, "Do you ever wish people knew more about this side of you?" He thought for a long moment, then shook his head. "Not really. I just hope the people who need it feel it. She reached out and placed her hand over his. I felt it, she said. When it mattered the most. Keanu didn't reply. He didn't need to. Outside, the rain grew stronger. Inside, something even more powerful was growing. The quiet understanding between two people who had faced the storm together, not with noise, but with presence. And unknown to them, leadership academies around the world were already editing their teaching slides, preparing to show a single still image. A woman standing at a podium, trembling but speaking. And a man sitting in the third row, silently nodding, changing everything, just by being there. A lesson without a lecture. The next morning, Anna woke to a soft knock on her door. She wasn't expecting anyone. Still in her pajamas, she peeked through the peephole and saw a familiar figure standing quietly outside. Tall, calm, holding a brown paper bag and 2 takeaway coffees. She opened the door slowly. Keanu? I figured you might not have eaten yet, he said with a small smile. I brought breakfast. She stepped aside and let him in. You don't sleep, do you? Sometimes, he said, walking to the kitchen counter. But it's easier to sleep when you know someone else is okay. She stood still for a moment, watching him like he was something from another world. Not for the first time, she wondered how someone so gentle could survive in such a loud, sharp industry. They sat together on the couch, quietly eating. You're not just checking on me again, are you? She asked finally. He hesitated, then pulled out his phone and opened a message. I wanted to show you something. He handed her the screen. It was a forwarded email from a headmaster in Singapore. They had used a short clip of her summit speech, and the moment Keanu stood clapping, as part of a school assembly, the message read, our students had tears in their eyes. They said, we want to be like that. Not just the speaker, the listener too. Anna read it twice. Keanu, she said softly, this is happening everywhere. He nodded. Because truth doesn't need subtitles. She looked up. Do you ever feel strange? Like you didn't mean for any of this to happen, but now it's bigger than both of us? He smiled. All the time. But just because we didn't plan it, doesn't mean it's not meant to be. Later that day, Anna received an official invitation. It was from a university, a prestigious one, asking her to speak again. Not at a film festival, not on a red carpet, at a leadership seminar. Me? She whispered aloud, holding the letter. Keanu read it from over her shoulder. They're asking you to teach what you lived, but I'm not a teacher, he looked at her. You taught the world what vulnerability looks like under pressure, what truth sounds like in fear, and what leadership can be when someone's heart speaks louder than their fame. She sat down, overwhelmed. What if I mess up again? She whispered. Keanu's answer was slow and sure. Then you show them what it looks like to get back up again. No one remembers perfect people. They remember real ones. Anna didn't answer right away. Her thoughts were heavy, but clear. Will you come with me? She finally asked. He nodded without hesitation. Always. 2 weeks later, they walked into a room filled with young people, future leaders, thinkers, writers, doctors, and quiet dreamers. The lecture hall was full, yet silent. Anna stepped up to the podium. It was a smaller stage this time, but the weight in her heart was the same. She looked out and saw dozens of eyes watching, not judging, just hoping. Her hands weren't shaking this time. Her voice was still soft, but there was strength beneath it. Not loud strength, deep strength. She began speaking, not from the paper in front of her, but from the place inside her that had once almost walked away. She spoke of fear and silence, and the moment someone stood by her without taking the spotlight, and in the third row again, Keanu sat, the students, noticed. One girl raised her hand after the talk. She didn't ask about films or fame. She asked, how do you find people who stand by you when you're scared? Anna's voice trembled again, but she smiled. You don't find them, she said. They reveal themselves. When everything is quiet and you're about to fall, they're just there. The room fell even quieter. A boy in the front row whispered, Like him? Anna nodded. Exactly like him. The professor in charge of A. The event later told them something unusual. We've had prime ministers, scientists, even astronauts come here. But your session was the one where no one checked their phones. Anna turned to Keanu, heart full. We didn't just tell a story, she said. We gave them a moment. He nodded. And those last longer than speeches. As they walked out of the hall, the students stood and clapped again, not as fans, not as followers, as witnesses. Witnesses to a kind of strength they didn't expect and would never forget. Behind every silence, 3 days after the university talk, Anna sat alone on her balcony. The evening breeze moved through her hair, and the city lights flickered like restless thoughts. She had returned home feeling full of emotion, questions, and something else she couldn't quite name. A part of her was proud. She had spoken again, and this time her hands didn't tremble, her voice didn't crack. She had told the truth in front of 100 curious minds. But somewhere deep inside, a soft unease stirred. Was she really becoming a voice for others? Or was she still that girl behind the curtain, afraid of judgment? Her phone buzzed gently. A message from Keanu. Walk with me? She didn't reply, with words. Just sent a thumbs up and got her coat. They met at a quiet park just past sunset. He was already there, sitting on a wooden bench under a flickering lamppost, watching the leaves fall without rushing them. She sat beside him, neither spoke for a moment. You've been quiet, he finally said. So have you, she replied. He looked at her with soft curiosity. What's on your mind? Anna leaned back against the bench and stared up at the darkening sky. I feel like I'm carrying something that doesn't belong to me. The attention? No, she whispered. The expectation. Keanu nodded slowly. It's heavy, isn't it? Heavier than anything I've lifted in a film, she said with a tired smile. He looked ahead. People see the strength. They don't see the price. Anna turned to him, her voice soft. What if I can't keep doing it? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I disappoint everyone? Keanu thought for a long time before answering. You will. She looked shocked. You will, he repeated gently. Because you're human, and the world doesn't need another perfect statue. It needs someone who can fall, rise, and keep speaking. She blinked back tears. How do you always know exactly what to say? I don't, he said. I just listen long enough. A few moments later, they began walking. As they walked deeper into the park, Anna noticed something unusual. A small group of people had gathered around a wooden table near the trees. There was no microphone, no camera, just a circle of chairs and open notebooks. What's that? She asked. Keanu smiled. A community circle. I've joined a few. Before. People come, sit, and speak from the heart. No pressure, just truth. She hesitated. Do they know who you are? Some do. But it doesn't matter here. Everyone's just a story. He stopped and looked at her. Want to join? She took a breath, then nodded. They joined the circle quietly. No one clapped. No one asked for autographs. The group welcomed them like two more voices in a world full of silence. One by one, people spoke. A woman shared how she lost her husband during the pandemic and still wakes up expecting to find him beside her. A teenage boy talked about being afraid to apply to college because he felt invisible. An elderly man spoke of how no one calls him anymore, and how hearing strangers talk is the only thing that reminds him he still exists. When it came time for Anna to speak, she froze. But then she looked at Keanu. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He just sat still, present, like always. And somehow, that was enough. "My name is Anna," she said, "and I used to believe that silence meant failure." The group listened closely. "But then I met someone who taught me that silence can also be space. A space where courage is born." She paused. "I used to act for cameras. Now I think I act so people remember they're not alone." A woman across from her wiped her eyes. When the circle ended, people hugged each other, exchanged names, and left without taking photos. Anna sat on the bench again after everyone had gone. Keanu sat beside her, the lamp above glowing softly. "You didn't prepare a speech tonight," he said. "No," she smiled. "I didn't need one." He looked at her quietly. "Exactly." That night, a small recording of Anna's words, taken by one of the listeners with permission, would go viral, not for being dramatic, but for being honest. Someone wrote beneath the video, "This isn't a performance, this is healing," and, again, across the world, classrooms and leadership pages began quoting her words. But to Anna, the real lesson wasn't what she said. It was what she felt, the power of being real, and the gift of someone who never needed to lead the room. Just light it gently. The final ECOA month had passed. Anna stood in front of a large auditorium once again. This time, not as a guest, but as the keynote speaker for an international summit on emotional intelligence and modern leadership. The room was filled with world figures, activists, educators, and youth leaders from nearly every continent. Banners stretched across the walls with phrases like "leading through empathy" and "courage starts with presence." Anna looked calm from the outside. Her dress flowed softly, her steps were steady, but deep within, her heart carried the weight of the moment, not of fear, but of responsibility. And in the third row, like always, Keanu sat. He had kept his promise, not just to be there, but to be exactly what he always was, present, steady, and invisible in the right moments. Before walking onto the stage, Anna turned slightly, scanning the room. When her eyes met his, he didn't smile, he didn't nod. He just looked back at her with the same quiet support that had once kept her standing behind a curtain. And once again, it gave her everything she needed. This time, there was no script. Anna walked up to the podium and simply spoke. "I'm not here to teach," she began. "I'm here to reflect." The hall fell completely silent. We often think leadership is about control, about having all the answers. But sometimes, it's about having none, and still choosing to show up. She paused, letting the words settle. "A few weeks ago, I was just an actress trying to survive a speech. But someone reminded me that the moment we stop pretending is the moment we begin to truly lead." She looked down at the crowd. "I wasn't saved by a loud voice or a long lecture. I was saved by someone who said nothing. Someone who stood by me quietly, when I couldn't stand alone." Anna continued, her voice slow, thoughtful. "What the world needs is not more perfect speeches. It needs more people who are willing to sit in the third row and believe in others, even when the cameras are off." The audience was still. Many looked toward the third row. Some had tears in their eyes. Anna took one last breath before finishing. And to the one person who never asked for credit, never stood in front, and never walked away, thank you. You taught me that presence is power. As she stepped back from the podium, the applause didn't come instantly. It came slowly, then grew, like waves crashing after a long silence. It wasn't wild, it wasn't chaotic. It was deep. After the summit, she walked backstage again, her heart calm this time. Keanu was waiting, leaning gently against the wall. "You did it again," he said softly. "No." Anna smiled. "We did." He chuckled. "I just sat." "And you have no idea how much that mattered. They walked out into the fresh air, where the sun was beginning to set. Golden light filtered through the trees, painting everything in a soft glow. Reporters called her name. Photographers raised their cameras, but she didn't look toward them. She looked at Keanu. "So," she said. "What now?" He thought for a moment. "You keep speaking. And when you get tired, someone else will remember your silence." She nodded. "Will you be there?" "I don't need to be seen to be present," he said. Anna smiled. The world would talk about her speeches. They would share her quotes. Schools would teach her moments. But what they wouldn't see, what they could never fully understand, was the quiet man who taught her the greatest lesson of all: you don't have to stand in the spotlight to change a life. Sometimes standing in the shadows is enough. Sometimes just being there is everything.